Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played 11 seasons for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report, coming to you twice a week on Mondays and Wednesdays to talk about hockey and other topics of interest. And Tom, I spent some time watching the hockey over the weekend, the NHL Prospect Tournament, one of the better prospect tournaments of the fall, held in Traverse City, lovely resort area. I know you know it.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful up there. Now a little pricey as things are apt to be in terms of when you're trying to stay there. But fortunately, I have a daughter and her husband who have a ski place up in northern Michigan, up near Cadillac. So we were able to stay there and
Nice.
cover the tournament. But got to see some good young players. Jiricek from the Columbus Blue Jackets, a defenseman there. It's interesting. The scouting read on him, Tom, was definitely going to play in the league. The limits of his ability is what was kind of the unknown, the variable. Like, he's going to play in the league. He's going to probably play a long time. He's going to be serviceable. But could he be a top pairing guy? Maybe not. Maybe he'll be a second pairing guy, maybe a forward defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
And when you watch them, I could see why they'd say that. There's nothing exceptional about what he does, but he's very good at a lot of different things. And then I saw Kent Johnson, the former University of Michigan player, who's got a lot of magic in his game, a little bit of sparkle when he's got the puck. And he was fun to watch. I think it struck me that Jarmo Kekalainen, the general manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets, I think he's done a pretty good job of drafting. I sort of liked his prospects. They lost that prospect game to the Red Wings. But anyway, speaking of the Red Wings, they've got a novelty that I think fans are going to enjoy, a 6'8" player named Elmer Soderblom.
Elmer.
Elmer Soderblom, and he can skate. He's not a lurch-like figure on the ice. He gets around pretty well. He's got some skill in front of the net. He's got good hands. And if you're expecting him to use that 6'8", you're probably going to be disappointed. Like, we always talk about a 5'11" guy that plays 6'2". He's kind of a 6'8" guy that plays like 6'1", but he's skilled. He scored 21 goals last year in those shortened Swedish Hockey League seasons. And he's great tipping pucks in front of the net. He drives hard to the net. Like, he's not afraid. That's not his issue. He just is not a guy that, that's not part of his repertoire. But Cross Hannes is on that team as well, who was a Western Hockey League guy who is pretty well-rounded. And also the guy that I think everyone's excited about is Simon Edvinsson. Yeah. He is the first-round pick, 6'6", to kind of go with 6'4" Moritz Seider.
That's a big
really,
team. Wow.
Really skate. So, he's a guy that skates like a 5'10", 5'11" guy. So, he's
even though they may not be physical, they're still hard bodies to move, right? Like, to play against those guys that are that big.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, Soderblom's 230 plus. He's 230 plus. I think he might, he could be approaching 240 now.
Wow. Elmer.
Yeah. I mean, great. Who's the greatest hockey player in NHL history named Elmer? You got to get this right.
Oh, that's awful. I don't know.
Elmer Locke.
Elmer Locke. Yes, I have.
Yeah. Played with Toe Blake.
Wow.
So Elmer Locke.
Would there be many other Elmers?
Well, Elmer Moose Vasco.
Oh, yeah.
So, there's some good Elmers. I guess in Canada, you guys didn't you have that safety guy, Elmer the Elephant?
I don't remember. I don't remember that.
Elmer, There's, Bob Duff, my colleague at Detroit Hockey Now. I was talking about when you were in elementary school, if you had a perfect safety record, that Elmer the Elephant would visit your school.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that. Wow. Maybe I had a bad safety record, so I never came.
Yeah. But, and of course, there's Elmer Fudd from Bugs Bunny.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so those are your famous Elmers.
I might have had an uncle named Elmer, too. I think I did have an uncle named Elmer. Yeah.
Now, how could you think you have a?
Well, it had a lot of relatives. It's one of those distant cousins, kind of different.
Distant uncle.
Yeah, distant uncle.
Yeah, that's a bizarre one. One more player I'm going to talk about, just for people who love prospects, Wyatt Johnston, who was first round pick for the Dallas Stars last year, had an unbelievably strong season for the Windsor Spitfires last season. He was on the Stars' second line in this rookie tournament. I wouldn't say he really stood out, but when you watch him, you know why everybody likes him. Sometimes you got to be able to look at the acorn and envision the oak tree. And I think that's what we're seeing with.
You're on a roll today. You're butter today. You're on a roll.
Yeah, butter. Yeah, okay. So that's what. You got to see with Wyatt Johnston, and maybe he just kind of had an off game. I mean, if you're 19 years old or 18 years old and you're in that tournament, a tournament where it's your first kind of pro tournament. I mean, like some of these, that's the interesting aspect of this. So, it's a prospect tournament, but the age range is 18 to 24. Like the Red Wings had a guy that was a college player who, it's going to play. He played at the end of last season for Grand Rapids, and now he's 24, and he's competing in there with kids that are still in junior. So
that is a big age difference too. That mentally, physically,
yeah, and he's obviously been in the weight room the last 3 or 4 summers, I'm sure, and. These 18-year-olds really probably have just gotten rolling in their work. I mean, I'm sure they've been doing it a couple of years, but there's a difference working out. And, I'm preaching the converted with you, but, a little big difference of working out when you're an adult and working out when you're a kid. When you
you learn a lot. Yeah, your body develops more. Yeah, no question. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my weekend. It was good to be back in a rink. There's nothing you like better than when it's 80 degrees outside to be carrying a small jacket with you because it's always a little nippy.
There you go.
And of course, I had an embarrassing moment too. And I just love to point this out just because I know better. So I'm done with the game and the rink has cleared out. Now we're leaving, we're going out into the sunshine. And so we go down from the concourse where the writing room was, and we go through the stands, and we're walking and we get to the Zamboni area. And I'm walking across, and I look down, and I see water. So I'm a little bit careful, but I'm not careful enough.
No, you didn't go down.
I did. I went down like a ton of bricks. Everybody came running. You're old when people come running and you go down. So because nobody comes down when you're 35.
Yeah, I know. Did you get hurt?
Well, was a little sore the next day, but I wasn't. No, the answer is no. I really wasn't hurt. Except, I had a very severely bruised pride. And when I called my wife and told her about it, I said, I embarrassed myself, my family, my profession. Everything. And my colleague, Bob Duff, of course, he said, "What about your state? Did you embarrass your state?" I probably embarrassed my state too. So Kevin, I went down, if you know the famous boxing call, Down Goes Frazier. That was me.
Did you happen to see the Sully Salt ladies? They were there.
I did see them. I wanted to go speak to them, but I was actually, when I saw them, I was just about to do an interview with Sean Horkoff, who is the assistant GM of the Red Wings. So I didn't go over, but I saw both of them there.
Good. So yeah, and they were there. They FaceTimed me because they ran into Paul Henry and Warren Reichel, who were there.
I saw Warren Reichel from a distance.
You did? Okay.
For a client, but I didn't speak to him as well. I didn't see Paul Henry. I would have engaged him. And
yes, for anybody that doesn't know, Paul Henry is one of the most unique men in just in the world, I think, isn't he? He's
he's got advanced degrees in counseling and psychology, maybe as well. That's a guess on my part. I really don't know that, but he's a hockey guy, and he has used both of them. And he's been a scout for a long time.
Yeah. So he'll drive forever to get to games. He loves those things. He loves being in the rink too.
Yeah. I drove back. This is another thing too. This is and I'm sure any of our older viewers can speak to this. You know, in my line of work, you know, I've done tons of driving. You know, I mean, I've flown on tons of planes, but, you know, because I get tired of getting on planes, like if it's under 5 hours, you know, I like to drive. You know, I live in Detroit and I like to drive to Pittsburgh. I like to drive to Toronto. You know, certainly I drive to Columbus 3 hours. You know, that kind of thing. The Traverse City tournament is about 4 hours from my home. And my lake house isn't any closer really either because it's west of me and that's north. So, you know, and driving home after a game, it was late at night. And, you know, I said to myself, you know, I don't really need this anymore. You know, I was tired and, you know, I just didn't really want to do it. You know, when you're 35 or 40, you know, you're just you know, bearing down, you're going, you don't care what time it is. I did care. You know, when it was approaching 11 o'clock and I'm still on the road going, man, I really, you know, I should have just stayed up there. What was I thinking? You know, basically.
Your machine, though.
Yeah. So anyway, the more subject I want to get into, and this is, I want to bring you into the conversation because you know more about this. I read an interesting story. Actually, it was a story based on, I think, Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick's great podcast that they do that I think everybody in the hockey world is familiar with. You know, they talk a lot about what's going on. They interviewed Sidney Crosby, and there was discussion about the fact, and I think this is very unique. He and Letang, Chris Letang, and Evgeny Malkin have been together 17 years.
Wow.
That's 17 years in the NHL. And they're just 100 plus, like I think it's 117, somewhere in that range, wins away from, you know, the most wins by a threesome on a team, you know, ever. And of course, you know, they all have lengthy contracts. Crosby's is the shortest with 3 to go. He even suggested that he may be willing to go longer, although he really didn't want to get into it because he said, I'm only thinking 3 years. But anyway, so it sure seems like they I don't know, should, perhaps, you know, one of them will be able to break that record. But
so who's got the record then for the threesome that the most?
I don't know. That wasn't in there because I tried to come up with that too in my head. I'm sure it had to be some Canadian fellas. I would think some guys from the 70s there.
How about like Canadians, maybe the Islanders, that run they had?
Well, you got to go. They got 17 years. There were no Islanders that played together.
You're right.
So you got. I mean, that's why I'm thinking, you know, like Belleville, you know, Richard, Belleville, you know, Laperriere.
How about the three? What the Red Wings didn't way back? Who'd they have? It was Gordie Howe.
But they traded Lindsay in the middle of all
that's
that.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Probably is a Montreal Canadiens. Yeah, it has to be.
Oh, you know, that was my thought, but I don't know the answer to that. You know, but I guess that's a possibility. But anyway, what I wanted to talk to you about is just the uniqueness of that, and you know, if you think about it, you know, when do you start memories? You know, age 4 or 5, somewhere in there. So, you know, these guys are in their 30s, so they've really only had 30 years of memories, and their memories with each other represent more than half of their memories.
That's true.
That's just incredible, really.
It's really like winning times too, right? Like they'll be like brothers forever. You know, so Herb Brooks said this should bond or whatever. Yeah.
Well, and you get, I mean, you know, other than a spouse, like you know, that's what it's like. I mean, it's like, you know, they've got a lot of time together. So.
Yeah. Sure. Have you got any friends that you've had since you were young, like in grade school?
Yeah, I do. And I'm still acquainted with them, but it's not the same.
Right.
You know, it is not the same, obviously. And, you know, when you get together, you're fine and it's fun. But, you know, I used to tell my kids that all the time. And, I mean, you're definitely going to, you know, relate to this. But, you know, when you're in college, the people you hang out with, you feel so close to them.
Yeah.
You know, in my case, it was part of a college newspaper. In your case, you were part of a hockey team. Yeah. But, you know, they were like brothers to you. And in my case, brothers and sisters, because, you know, I work with women as well. and you're so close, and you spent so much time when for me, getting the paper out and then going to the bar afterward. You during breaks, everybody went home, but you didn't. You were still working on the paper, so we were all together. So we spent a lot of time together, and they're so important. And then everybody goes their separate ways, and we're on Facebook. We get together, and so you're just not as tight. It's not the same. And so I used to tell my kids, friends come and go, but families forever. And you do over the course of your life. You work for a company, you're friends with them, and then you leave that company, and then you hang on to them, you make some calls, you might see them have a beer, but it's not the same.
That's true. So it reminds me of the Kyle brothers up in Northern Michigan University, Walt and John Kyle Jr. So Walt coached in the National Hockey League for a little bit. So we all lived together. I was telling the story the other day. 3 of the most stubborn people on the planet, and they had a car that the father gave them that we all rode in. We're all going to the same place together, mainly the rink. We didn't go to too many classes. So the deal was we're each going to take turns filling it up with gas. So we drive one day, and I can't remember who it was that didn't fill it up. They didn't get their job done. So we ran out of gas on the side of the road. And we're probably no more than like a couple hundred yards from the gas station, but we're also stubborn. We just wouldn't move. We're all blaming each other and just sitting in the car. We got to the point, like, must have been sitting there 2 hours before someone finally said, I'm getting out of here. I think it was Junior actually too, because he knew that we were in bed. But that's actually pretty funny to think about that stuff.
Yeah. Isn't it great though that men all have, I know maybe women do too, but I just haven't, fished them out of them, but about cars you had and stories like, I had this Maverick that the starter on it, the bolt and then there's a cable and you connect the starter, and the bolt had for whatever reason fallen off and everything. So to start the car, you had to crawl under there and physically place the cable, just kind of sit it at the little nub that used to be a bolt. And then you start your car, okay, but that would fall off.
Right.
So you only got one start to the placement of the cable on the nub. So if your car stalled at a light, you'd have to get out. I had to get out of my car, crawl under my car, place the cable on that little nub, and then start my car.
That's funny.
That's how I lived my life. Because I didn't have the money to get it fixed. I actually, how I ended up getting fixed was one of my friend's father, was just a fix-it guy. And so he removed the starter, and then he put a new bolt on there. So I was able to, and actually, it's so funny I had done that for, months. But when I got that bolt, it just seemed like the greatest thing in the world. Like, oh my God, I got a bolt on my starter and I don't have to crawl under my car to start it. And then the other one, we had a car. It was actually my girlfriend's car at the time, that we could only start it with pliers on the solenoid.
So hold on, you had another woman in your life other than your wife?
I did. That was years ago. But anyway, you get the pliers. Do you remember starting cars with pliers and a solenoid where you just put them over the end, and that's the only way we could get her car started. But that was with that. So, we take all that for granted now. But it was fun times back then. Didn't seem fun at the time. But
yeah, reminds me of I think I told you the story too. Donnie Waddell, who now is the president and general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes, he had a green truck with one of those caps on the back. So it wasn't insulated like that. And we were the 6 of us were going to go down to Florida. I had separated my shoulder. They were coming back off a road trip. I was going to have everything packed and in the truck, and then we're going to jump right in the truck and drive down to Fort Lauderdale for spring break. So I couldn't, it was my right arm that was in the sling. So I couldn't hit the 3 on the tree, when the stick there would change gears. So I had to reach over with my left hand to try to change gears. Well, in my enthusiasm, I pulled the gear shift right off the steering wheel stem. And I'm driving over to the bus where we're just going to leave. So I get out of the car, and Don's standing there, and I hand him his gear shift. And he wasn't mad about that. He just grabbed a roll of tape out of his hockey bag and taped it back onto the stem. And we drove 35 hours and 35 hours back to Florida with the tape together.
Hockey tape. People always talk about duct tape, but hockey tape is just as valuable. Just as valuable. That's right. Just getting back to Crosby and Malkin. Let's get back in hockey. But I just kind of wanted to talk. It seems to me now in the modern hockey world, we're always got one foot in the idea that we should be rebuilding. Yeah. And, in the old days, you wanted to go with that team as long as you could. And now the fan base, it's almost like there's 2 separate veins of rooting. You have the one where you're just trying to win. And And then there's another, sort of vein where, you're trying to get in the position to win. And it's the rebuilding sort of vein where, and, people now accept that. In the old days, they didn't.
Yeah.
But they do now. Like,
that's a good point by you. Like, yeah, it never was a thing we tooling.
No. Oh, no, it was not accepted. But now the fan base, which is, we're going to say they're more sophisticated in how it works in a salary cap world and whatever. But now they're very accepting. Like the fans in Toronto, when it was announced what they were doing, like they were all for it. Like, what took you so long was their attitude. Yeah. And the Rangers announced their rebuild. Steve Yzerman talks about his rebuild in Detroit. Like, do
you think you could get away with not doing a rebuild and still be a competitive team over and over?
Well, that's what the Penguins are doing. That's what I was going to ask you.
Oh, okay.
Does this make any sense? What the Penguins are doing? I mean, there are three guys. I mean, Letang's going to be 41 when this contract is over. Letang's a heck of a hockey player, but
and that's interesting. Remember, I did that thing with Susan Brooks, the convention, or whatever, and all the teams they had their fan clubs from all the teams from there. And when the Pittsburgh guy got up and spoke, he was very critical of them doing that, like signing all those old guys more. He actually wanted the regroup or the retool. I know I've told this story before, but it bears repeating because it's part of what we're talking about here. My my son-in-law, and then my cousin, who is like a son to me. That we always talk about the Detroit Lions, and the three of them were in agreement that the Lions, needed to go out and get a real young quarterback. And I was trying to stay with Matthew Stafford, as the quarterback, because I thought Matthew Stafford was a terrific quarterback. I just thought they needed, to get other pieces and to continue along. But they were rooting for the Lions to lose games so they would get a better draft pick. And that's a foreign concept to people our age. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. We, the teams that we root for are our teams. And, I don't know, losing a game, tanking and all that just seems,
I know. So I'm trying to think when it first started. I guess it'd have to be in the cap era, right? The cap started in 04, 05.
Well, I mean, the Sabres and Maple Leafs really, I thought, legitimized it. The Oilers sort of were doing it,
or they were just so bad they kept getting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm saying they sort of were doing it because I don't think it was a plan. I think they sort of fell into it. Yeah. Because they just, they didn't do it well.
So you think back like to Kenny Holland, where Mr. LH, the owner of the team, was still alive, and they had them that 26-year run of making the playoffs. Yeah, and that was part of the criticism of him, right? That he's kept trying to just make the playoffs instead of doing a full rebuild. But
but the way that I think they viewed it, like there are people, revisionists, as I like to call them, who think that was wrong. That the Red Wings kept trying to make the playoffs. They should have just, threw all their chips in and said, well, let's start over again. Yeah. But was it really wrong? I mean,
so you're in the middle of that record-breaking streak, right, of years to
make
the playoffs, and all of a sudden you decide you're going to have a rebuild, and now you miss the playoffs. Everybody's going, "What'd you do that for? You're setting a record."
Well, yeah. Well, and not only that, I think the idea that we first got of the salary cap era is that it brought parity, and we know what parity means, that everybody's able to compete on equal footing, and teams are sort of close to each other. There's not the big wide gap. I've brought this up before, but prior to the lockout, the Penguins had a payroll of $20-some million, and the Red Wings were at $80 million. That was the gap, the highest and the lowest. Yeah. And the idea was everybody's going to be spending similar amounts of money, although there would be still a gap, but you'd be close. So I think from the Red Wings perspective, if you got into the playoffs, it was like you got a ticket to ride. You were in. You got to go to the party. You've been invited to the ball.
You got a chance of winning.
Yeah. If you got to the ball, you have a chance to, get into the big dance. And I think that's how everybody sort of viewed that. But some people didn't. Some people started to think, well, we'd be better off and we'd have a better chance if we just started over. And we all know. The danger is you get on that treadmill, where you're 500, so you're not getting good draft picks. You're not good enough to compete. Yeah. And then, you're stuck in that. It's like being in neutral. You're running in place, you're not getting anywhere, you know. So I think like right now, like you can argue the Nashville Predators are in that. Not really good enough to win, not bad enough to get high draft picks, or to get early draft picks, and you know they're just running in place. Winnipeg Jets, you know,
Philadelphia Flyers.
Well, Philadelphia Flyers now have sort of bottomed out, you know, so
they think they're a contender.
Well, they don't know that they've, you know, so
that's funny. They don't know how bad they are.
Oh. No, they don't. Well, sometimes that can be good.
Yeah.
You know, when you got people who just believe that they can compete, you know, God bless the Sutter boys. I mean, they always felt, you know, if you work hard enough, you can beat anyone. You know, that's how they always felt.
Yeah.
And like I said the last time we talked about this, I'd listened to all that thinking to myself, you know, I don't care how hard you would have competed in the 1980s, you were not going to beat the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah,
you know?
because the pretty good chance the coach they've got there now, John Tortorella, is going to get the most out of that hockey team.
Right.
So they'll be better this year, but does that mean that they're going to be fooling themselves thinking that they're a contender, that they're better than
Yeah. So, but anyway, I don't know. So which is a better system, you know, because at some point, if you continue on this track, if you don't trade one of these guys, or they, you know, it's going to hurt you. You're going to get to the point where, you know, they're eating up a high percentage of your cap space, and they're not going to be able to produce.
Right. So what's the alternative? So you got Sidney Crosby at 3 more years of a contract. If you did not resign Malkin and Letang, then that really hurts your hockey team. So you got probably one of the best players who's ever played the game now, finishing off 3 years of a substandard team. Is that how you look at it?
Well, personally, I agreed with them re-signing those 3 guys. That's how I felt about it, because they're all playing at a high level.
Yep.
And I do think sometimes that I think it's fans always want to look at it in terms of, you know, the average salary, and you're going to be paying $8 million. But, you know, the way I think that GMs look at it is look, we're paying this total amount of money to get these guys, and their yearly salary average is really just for our cap purposes.
Right.
Like, you know, in order to get it, you know, we got to give them maybe some extra years. So we're not really paying Malkin, you know, whatever it is, $7 million or $8 million, I forget what it is at, but you know, we're really paying them 10. You know,
sorry, Susan just brought up a good point there too. Again, Rangers didn't tank, and they still get the #1 pick in the draft. So it certain benefits you to lose to then get that high. You got a shot at that #1 pick.
But they announced they're rebuilding. I mean, they didn't tank. Like, you know, and again, it's the definition of tanking. It really bugs me. People just don't really grasp what tanking really is. And I still have readers who think that players tank. Yeah. And I tell them all the time, coaches and players do not tank. Tanking is a managerial move. It's a manipulation of rosters and decisions based on the idea that you want to be bad. But they don't tell players not to perform well. You just don't, you know, you don't fix problem areas. Yeah. You don't, you know, you bring in younger players. That's how you tank. And
imagine if you're Taves and Kane in Chicago.
Yeah,
the guys that have won Stanley Cups,
right?
Now they're gonna have to go through the rebuild. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a great example that we can use. You know, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves do not care what the management perspective is. When they're going into a game, they're going to try to win it. Yeah. You know, they're not saying, "Well, our mandate here is to be the worst hockey team we can be." Yeah. They just don't care about that, and really, you know, we've seen a lot of rebuilding. We haven't seen as much tanking as people seem to indicate. As they just use tanking as kind of a general term for rebuilding, and it's not that whatsoever. Yeah. I wish people would sort of get that down, because you know, I've had readers say to me, "Well, I watch it. You could just tell the players are all tanking." No, they're not, because, you know, first of all, players, it hurts them.
Oh yeah,
because when the dealing is done on the rebuild, they're likely out of there. Because you know they might.
I'm just thinking about the dynamic in that locker room in Chicago, right? With Taves and Kane, both appear to be real quality character guys. and they're going to be playing with these young players. And young players are going to have off nights. They're just going to have bad games. They're not going to have the experience that those guys have got. And they still want to win, Taves and Kane.
Right.
They can tell them all they want. It's a rebuild, but that's going to be pretty awkward. Imagine if you're a young kid there too, and you know you're disappointing two, potentially Hall of Fame players, in Taves and Kane. I remember when Gretzky first got to LA, and even though I played in the league for a few years, if you ever made a bad pass or something like that, you think, oh God, I screwed up Wayne Gretzky's play. It was Wayne Gretzky. You got over that in a while, we were veteran guys, most of us, but man, that's going to be a tough dynamic, having those guys in that locker room. But
yeah, and Seth Jones, Seth Jones is not going out to lose. It's funny. I hear people saying, well, Seth Jones, his skills have deteriorated and whatever. He's not the same player. And yet, I talked to some Columbus writers at this tournament, and what was their take? The Blue Jackets defense hasn't been the same since they lost Seth Jones. Oh, is that right? It's not, to have that one guy you can lean on. I mean, they got Werenski, but, he's just a different type player.
Did he sign as a free agent, or was he traded, Seth Jones?
Seth Jones, he was traded because he said, I'm not going back. I'm not going to sign long-term with you. So anyway, that's going to be a difficult situation there where, you've got some guys that are going to try every night. And, and I think for the most part, that you can pretty much call that a tanking there because of all the people that they've moved out. But, again,
not just all old guys that got rid of too, right? Some younger players too.
Well, DeBrincat, that's why I don't understand it. If you were rebuilding, I mean, look at the Rangers. Now, I would like to point out that there were teams around the league, and I can definitely vouch for that because one specific general manager had a lengthy conversation with me. He was appalled by the New York Rangers coming out and telling season ticket holders that they were rebuilding when they were still competing with. He said they're the New York Rangers. Right. That was his take to me. He said I would be embarrassed if I was GM of the New York Rangers. I would embarrass that I have to tell my season ticket holders that we're rebuilding.
Why?
Because he's the general manager, one of the most powerful GMs. It's the perception of it all. He thought that was in. But anyway, regardless of how he felt about it, right. They announced they were going to rebuild, but their idea of rebuilding is more of the traditional one. Yeah, right. What they were saying is we're going to create some spots for younger players, and we're going to bring them in. We're going to change over a percentage of our roster. But a year later, they went out and got Panarin.
Right.
True. The rebuilds that we've been seeing, theirs was almost a partial rebuild.
Yeah,
it turned out. To be honest with you, if we were defining the rebuilds that we've seen, this was more of a reset than a rebuild.
Yeah.
Even though they called it a rebuild,
right.
In the letter to season ticket holders.
Right.
So they were willing to go out. None of the other tanking teams, and I'm looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Buffalo Sabres, right now, the Chicago Blackhawks, and maybe the Arizona Coyotes. Those are teams that we can have identified that seem to be tanking, managerial moves. Mm-hmm. None of those teams would have signed a player like Panarin, right away.
Well, and you said, now that I think about it too, you said it before. It is New York, right?
Right.
MSG Television. It's
right. Well, that was the GM's point too. Yeah. He just said that's embarrassing. You're printing money in your basement. You're a powerful team. You're a rich team, and then you got to go to your season ticket holders and say, we're going to have to do that. Now, as it turned out, it was the quickest rebuild that you'll ever see. I mean, we're 4 years into the Yzerman rebuild, right. And he's hit the lottery 3 years.
I'm just thinking about it too, though, when they start to trade guys like Ryan McDonough, then if they don't tell the fans that we're in a rebuild, then the fans are going, "What are you doing? Why are you trading Ryan McDonough? Arguably, he's the captain, one of the best players."
Yeah, you don't think the Ranger fans would have figured it out that if you were trading Ryan McDonough, that the fan bases in today's world is are pretty sophisticated.
Like most places, and even more so in New York, I think they want to win now, right?
Yeah.
So you trade Ryan McDonough, you're going, are you quitting or what you doing? It's not that I'm saying they wouldn't understand it, but I'm thinking they wouldn't accept it if it's explained to them. Like, okay, here's what we're doing: we're rebuilding, and we did it in a timely fashion. Obviously, I didn't say that at the time, but
well, I think it's two different elements. I mean, I don't think I understand what the logistics were and why the Rangers did what they did.
Right.
And I got no problem with it. I'm just saying what he felt he would have had personal embarrassment. That was his take was. He would have had personal embarrassment to be the GM of the New York Rangers and have to stand up and say to season ticket holders, we've got this team to the point where it's screwed up to the point that we've got to, rebuild. So
but I hear me saying that, but I don't think they're saying it was screwed up so bad. I think they're just saying we're stuck in the middle. We're not going up anymore.
Yeah, but again, I think they didn't call it a reset; they called it a rebuild. And like there's a difference between a reset. I mean, that's what they ended up doing because it was dramatic on the back end, and the younger players really have gotten the opportunity. I mean, it's still. You look at last year's defense and the younger players that they had involved. They had a lot of younger players that they've brought in, but they've also, made aggressive, bold moves and signed veterans and been active in the free agent market.
And as we've talked before, Shesterkin come along and playing the way he played. Really, I mean
that pushed it right along. So, I mean, I don't know how anybody could find any fault with how the Rangers have handled this because their turnaround has been so quick. And they really had not bottomed out when they announced that too. That was the other thing that the GM bought it out. Like they were still within striking distance of the playoffs, but but they basically said at the time, reading between the lines, that's not good enough for the Rangers. We want to be a contender. Being in the hunt for the playoffs, wasn't.
And that the way that team looked was it was just going to barely make the playoffs every year. If it did make the playoffs, barely make the playoffs.
Right. Yeah. No, like I'm not criticizing what they did. I'm just telling you what that guy said. But and the fact that I don't think it's not a traditional rebuild as we kind of know it. It's been more of a reset. So
I agree.
Did we talk about Blake Wheeler? We did, didn't we?
No, we did not. We didn't touch on it.
Well, obviously that is really interesting.
What's going on there now?
Well, they took away his captaincy.
They did. This recent?
Yeah, that was last weekend.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah. So, and Bowness put a statement out. That's the new coach for them. It's funny to call Rick Bowness, who was, my age, as the new coach, but that's the case. And he's not going to have a captain. And they have really sold it as hard. And, I think they are being somewhat sincere when they say this. It's not an indictment on Wheeler's captaincy as much as it is on the fact that they want a new leadership group to go along with this new regime. So they're going to have no captain, and they're going to hope that a group will emerge and take over. And what wasn't said, but what we all know is that, they've been accused of having dressing room culture issues, and they're hoping that will change. And that obviously this is Bowness's first step in trying.
So they're going to change the culture by taking the C away from the captain, who supposedly is one of the problems in the locker room.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what some people are guessing that the case is, but I think what they really are saying, I saw Darren Dreger reported this, is that they're hoping that a new kind of group will emerge because, there are several factions there.
But so one guy was the captain, and now they take the C away from him, and now another leadership group is going to step up. But what does that do with Wheeler? To me, I almost wonder, are they wanting to get him out of here, and hopefully he asks for a trade?
Yeah, maybe.
That's a real slap in the face. If you're a good leader and you get character, and they take the C away from you.
Well, let me bring this up to you, because this is what I had just said, and I talked about this before. And I'm not necessarily endorsing this. I throw this out as an option because I really haven't thought it through. But, I've often wondered, the one thing about sports teams is they change from year to year.
Right.
Yeah,
you brought this up before. Yes, you brought this up.
Yeah. Oh, did we talk about it on the show?
Yeah, you touched on. No, that's still good though.
Yeah, just on the captain. The idea of changing every year, and then you won't have these situations. Now, you don't have to change every year, but it would be sort of like president or whatever, where like it wouldn't be a shock if this year we're going with a new captain.
I guess as long as it's been determined ahead of time, so you're not stripping the C off a player, like
No.
embarrassing him, right? You're just moving on to somebody else.
Every year, because you said it would needed to be a vote. That's right. We did talk about this a little bit.
So that leader that had the C on, he could still be a leader in the locker room. He just wouldn't have the C on any longer. Right? So as long as he understood that it wasn't insulting to him. Yeah.
Well, and we always hear guys say all the time, I don't need a C to be a leader. I mean, I guess, is that just something you say, or do you believe that?
No, it's true. Yeah, you don't have to have any letter on your jersey to still be a leader. There's lots of guys, and they lead in different ways, right? Maybe they aren't the vocal guy that gets up all the time. Maybe they're the hard worker who says the right thing at the right time, isn't as vocal as maybe somebody else, and maybe isn't as dominant a player. We've talked about that before too. It's hard to be a captain unless you're one of the top players on the team. You don't have to be the best player there on the team, but you can't be a fourth line guy and be a captain. It's hard. You can still be a leader as a fourth line guy, but it's hard to be a captain there.
Yeah, I mean, it never works. Tough guys sometimes are really good leaders in the dressing room, but they can never have been captains. Yeah. So, that makes sense.
So, okay, did you see the steak dinner? No, you wouldn't have saw the steak dinner. You're up in Traverse City.
No, I was. Yeah,
steak dinner done in the air fry. So pan seared it first, and then put it in the air fryer.
Wow, wow. Do you season your steaks a lot, or
good steaks? You don't put anything else but salt and pepper on it.
Yeah. I saw Bobby Flay one time was on a thing, and I thought he said a point that I've always remembered. He said, professional chefs always underseason their meat,
right? And
he goes, and amateur chefs always overseason their meat. So
some people put like steak sauce on before it's cooking, and it's just.
I've never heard of that, but I've certainly heard people putting a lot of steak sauce on afterwards.
Yeah, I know. I saw one woman was where I got the recipe, the idea to put in the air fryer was a woman used the steak in the air fryer, and she seasoned it with A1 steak sauce or something first.
Wow. Yeah, I know. I have seen people use a Worcestershire on their hamburgers and things.
That's all right. Yeah.
So. Anyway, all right. Well, we appreciate everyone from tuning in. We'll be back. We're getting close. Next week, of course, we'll be in the throes of training camp for the most. It starts this weekend for most teams around the NHL. And then we'll have exhibition games. Preseason games. That's what we call them in the NHL, preseason games, not exhibition games. Yeah. So when they're trying to take your $70 to come to see one, they want to make them sound a little better than exhibition games.
There you go.
So anyway, if you want to read me, Troy Hockey Now and HockeyBuzz.com.
And if you'd like to listen to the radio version of this show, you can go to radio.co at 365 Sports. Everybody have a great 2 days. We'll see you on Wednesday.